Welcome to Great British Ghosts. Today we're in the heart of the Cotswolds. Later on I'll be going to the village of Presbury, which is said to be the most haunted village in the whole of England. But first I'm on my way to Woodchester Mansion, a magnificent Gothic-style manor house. It's not an easy place to find, and let me tell you, even this driveway has an eerie, haunted feel about it. Today's mansion was built in the late 19th century, but sits on the site of a much earlier house which dated back to the 1600s, and the estate itself can trace settlements back to pre-Roman times. But perhaps the most intriguing thing about Woodchester Mansion is that it was never actually finished. The Freemason who built it, William Lee, ran out of money before it could be completed, and it stayed pretty much in the same condition for the last 150 years. But building this Gothic fantasy came at a human cost. There were 7 deaths, 6 bad accidents, and even a murder while it was being constructed. And some say that the mansion is cursed.
You do hear very unusual things throughout the day. Some of them you can explain, birds flying around, possible tiles slipping, but there are every now and again noises that I have no idea where they come from, what's making them, and it is quite strange. The previous director came down here with her partner, and she thought that the paranormal was just a lot of hocus pocus. And they were down in the cellar, I believe, just having a normal chat. And all of a sudden, his hard hat just flew off of his head. And because she was with him, I think it worried her ever so slightly as well, because of course you're very sceptical about these things until you actually experience something yourself.
Local historian and paranormal investigator Chris Howley has spent years investigating the ghosts at Woodchester Mansion, and he agreed to show me around.
Hi, Michaela.
Hi, Chris.
Nice
How are you?
Welcome to Woodchester Mansion.
Well, this certainly looks like an eerie part of the house.
The whole building is quite eerie. This is one of the hot spots that we're walking into now. This is where we believe we've got a resident poltergeist, one of these spirits that are renowned for throwing things around. So it's quite an interesting part of the building.
And have you witnessed that yourself?
I have, yes. It was a group of 4 of us. We were coming in from this corridor, the one you've just walked up one night. And as we approached the turning down to the chapel, a stone came out and landed at our feet. So nobody in the corridor. I mean, we looked straight down there. There's somebody messing around, but there was nobody down there at all.
And was it coming at you sideways?
It just came out of the corridor, about this high off the ground, landed at our feet. No explanation for it.
Jeez, it's not as if a bat or a bird could have dislodged it.
Well, no, I mean, that's one of the theories. It's an old building. People say if you've got a stone throw, surely it's masonry falling. But that night, definitely not. No explanation. I was completely sceptical 7 years ago of anything paranormal. This building has changed my views. I'm still sceptical of the general things that people jump at and instantly assume as a ghost. But with this building, I've had experiences that I have no rational explanation for. This leads down to our mortuary.
Oh my goodness, well if ghosts are going to hang out anywhere, it's going to be in a mortuary, isn't it?
Just through here. Okay, this is actually a Victorian game larder, but the reason we've nicknamed it the mortuary is because during the Second World War we had American and Canadian troops stationed at the mansion doing exercises in preparation for D-Day. Unfortunately, there was an accident down at the lakes where one of the pontoon bridges collapsed, killing several of the troops. Their bodies were stored in this room prior to being shipped back to America. So we think some of the ghostly apparitions of American servicemen within the building stem from this room.
Has anyone actually seen soldier ghosts or spirits?
They have. Interestingly enough, 2 years ago, We sent somebody on a lone vigil upstairs at another location, which I will show you later, where they took a picture which appears to be an American serviceman.
No way, they've actually got a photograph of him?
We've actually got a photograph of him, yeah. I was there the night that photograph was taken. Skeptically, I examined the camera to check the DSCO references of each picture, and the picture hadn't been added to the memory card prior to the time that the person went up there. So we've since had that verified by universities, and I'm convinced that we have genuinely got a photo of an airman from previous time.
Are there stories all over the house?
There are. I mean, if we come to this rather grand spiral staircase here, there's a monk that comes down this stairwell out through the doorway and walks into the chapel itself.
Well, is that something that regularly happens?
I wouldn't say regular. As with all of the sightings in this building, they're infrequent. You just never know when you're going to get them. But we have actually caught this on video. We've got some footage of this monk walking across that doorway.
And what does he look like in the footage?
Well, in the footage, it's your typical ghost. It's grainy, but it's just a hooded, shaped figure that glides across the doorway.
What do you think it actually was?
We tried to disprove the hooded figure because the only thing we could come up with that would cause that sort of anomaly on camera would be a light form, whether that be torchlight or car headlights set in the car park. So we reassembled everything the following weekend, and we were trying all sorts. We had torches shining through every window. We had cars turning around in the car park, trying to shine light into the area in as many different ways as we could. But none of them come close to even barely recreating anything on camera.
We had a caretaker, Mr. Fry, who lived here for 17 years. He had lots of stories to tell, but the one that always stuck with me was that he'd been, obviously still is in a long-term relationship, and his partner would stay over here on the odd occasion, but she would not move in with him. And one of the stories that she told me that really sent shivers down my spine was when she was lying in bed one night, and because you're in the middle of nowhere, it's pitch black, but the moon was out. And she said she was laying in bed and she just saw a black kind of ghost move through the window and across the ceiling. I mean, it petrified her so much, she said she couldn't even get out of bed. And so that, I think, for me, was probably the scariest thing I've actually heard from somebody that's, you know, that has slept here.
Now, what's the one animal you associate with haunted houses? Bats. Bats in the belfry, flying through the darkness, terrifying any unsuspecting visitors. Well, Woodchester Mansion certainly doesn't disappoint.
We've got all 4 species of bat which reside in the mansion. They are protected species, so they have been cordoned off from the rest of the building, but we have currently around 750 bats in residence.
Chris Romer is one of the few academics who have made a study of ghosts. He believes that there is something going on at Woodchester Mansion.
When I first came to Woodchester, it was as a cynic, because after all, although there was a house here before, Spring Park, this house has hardly ever been occupied, and why would a house where no one had lived been haunted? So I came here really expecting to disprove any ghost stories. And we heard someone coming down. It was just before dawn. Somebody came riding up towards the house, canter, down to a trot, down to a walk. And it seemed to actually go past us, but there was nobody there. We never did find a rational explanation for that. So even an old cynic like me had to say, well, actually that was very, very strange. So was it a genuine ghostly experience? I don't know, but I certainly, having talked to a lot of people over the years, would say that Woodchester is very haunted.
Okay, this is the area where we believe the ghost of the builder comes from. It's reported that one of the builders fell to their death. As you can see, we're quite high up, so it's quite a nasty drop down there. So quite a traumatic sort of death for somebody, and we do believe that a lot of the ghostly sightings do come from trauma. And this is the area. I personally think that you need to consider the house has been stood for 150 years unoccupied. So there's no soul to the building. There's never been any life in the building. So whether that's the reason the spirits congregate trying to bring life back into this stone shell, I don't know. And this is the way to the cellar, where we've had some really quite eerie activity.
The cellar's always haunted, isn't it? If anywhere's going to be haunted, it's the cellar.
I think you're going to like this. The main activity we've had in the cellar seems to be focused in this final vaulted room.
I've got to say, it's freezing down here, isn't it?
It does add to the atmosphere.
So what have you seen down here?
This area is quite bizarre. It seems that we have what we like to call an elemental, which isn't a ghost of a person or something that's lived. It seems to be a form of energy that feeds on people's fears. Now this can manifest itself in many ways, but predominantly down here, it seems to just fill the room with this complete blackness where you can't even see your hand in front of your face.
So what does this energy form look like?
When the energy actually materialises into something visual, people have described seeing a golem type character from Lord of the Rings hunched over on all fours and even feeling the touching on the back of the legs. The most recent activity at the mansion was a few weeks ago when a paranormal group on an overnight investigation had had a particularly quiet night. At the end of the evening, around 4 o'clock in the morning, we were all in the drawing room while the host for the night was summing up, saying, "Thank you all for coming. We've had a really quiet night." However, it was at this point that we heard footsteps coming up from the library, stiletto heels tattooing across the wooden floor towards the drawing room. I immediately ran out of the drawing room through one door, the host the other, and we ran round the corner and met each other. There was nobody there. Everybody was accounted for. Everybody was in the drawing room, apart from whatever made these footsteps.
CJ, can you sum up what you think is going on here at Woodchester Mansion?
It could be that there are the spirits of the dead. It could be that the horseman we heard was in fact a murdered 18th century aristocrat. There are two stories that explain a ghostly cause for a horseman. Or it could be, as I said before, that somehow the expectation of seeing a ghost causes imagination, causes all kinds of other things to cut in, or maybe even allows our own psychic powers to come out and haunt us. And I find that the scariest prospect of all.
In many ways, Woodchester Mansion is a very beautiful building, but it's also a very disturbed one. Maybe it's the Gothic architecture, or the haunting stories, or perhaps it's just because it's been abandoned for over a century and a half, but it definitely has a bit of an eerie feel to it. And it's not surprising that this house is considered by some to be the most haunted house in Britain. This is Presbury Village near Cheltenham in Gloucestershire, and it's the most haunted village in Britain. There are lots of ghosts that are regularly seen here, from a headless horseman riding through the village to a black abbot who wanders through the graveyard.
Here in Presbury we have multitudes of ghosts. We've got a spinet player, we've got old Moses who's down on the corner over there, we've got the hanging man that's over there, we've got horses that come up and down here, there's a headless horseman, we have got, there's an old lady just round the corner that's seen collecting sticks along the street and then she just disappears. Another old lady around that corner that stares through people's windows and then she just disappears when you look up at her. I mean, that's just within 50 yards of where we're sat now.
Ross Andrews is a local historian who's written several books about the ghosts in Presbury, and he agreed to take me on a tour of its most haunted sites.
I've seen ghosts as well. This is the important bit. One of the ghosts reported in Presbury is of supposedly Fred Archer, a jockey. And we're now at the King's Arms, and he's responsible for quite a few of the hauntings here, which include poltergeist activity, it includes windows being opened and closed, even though the entire building has been locked up from the inside, and the only way you can open the windows is from the inside. Now, Fred has also been seen outside the pub, and just coming around this corner here, there was a group of ladies, this is going back quite a few years, and it was during Cheltenham Race Week, so you would expect to see a jockey, so they weren't too shocked when this jockey walked across the road. And he disappeared halfway across the road. They're all rather freaked out, and they went round the corner, and the whole thing happened again. Fred walked across the road and then disappeared halfway across the road.
And he's dressed as a jockey?
As a jockey, yes.
How did he die?
Supposedly he hanged himself here in the pub.
So Ross, Presbury is said to be the most haunted village, is it?
Well, there's a lot of places that will lay claim to the same thing, but Presbury, in my research, I would say has more ghosts per square foot than any other village in the entire country.
And that's how it's measured?
I would say so, yes.
Do you have any idea how many different ghosts you've seen?
Well, when I've done the research, in the last 20 years, I would say you're looking at about 30 or more separate incidents, at least of separate ghosts, that is.
Well, that's a lot of ghosts.
Well, yeah, indeed. Well, and for a ghost hunter like myself, it's the perfect place to go to.
Have there been hauntings here?
Yes, and it's rare, actually. Most graveyards aren't actually haunted, whereas this one has possibly one of the world's most famous ghosts in it.
Really?
This one's called the Black Abbot, and he starts walking through the village, and he always starts off here. Ends up walking down to the high street, and as they walk along the high street, he ends up in a place called Reform Cottage. And that's apparently where all the monks were buried. The theory is you can see him at Christmas time, Easter time and All Saints' Day, supposed to wander through the village, but so many people have reported him all times of the year, in the middle of the day, middle of the night. So, as you leave the graveyard, you end up in one of the most haunted streets in the world. This is Mill Street. Right, well, this street here is notorious for hauntings, including the plough in here, but my favourite ones are actually outside. We have a marching army that comes down here. It gets heard more than seen.
I was going to say, no one surely has seen a whole marching army.
Yep, yeah, and in the fields behind here, they've seen an army marching across.
Really?
But they've heard it marching up and down this road. And one story is a man was walking his dog along here, which is a rare occurrence anyway, and the dog just wouldn't move as these soldiers were marching along, at which point they stopped marching and then the dog sort of ran off. Well, this street here, this is called the Burgage, yet again, a pub here that reports many ghosts, but one of the famous ghosts that they'll report is actually outside in the street. And Presbury has about 3 famous horseman ghosts, several of which are headless and so on, and one of them happens outside here. And there are reports going way back to Civil War times when a dispatch rider was coming across from Evesham and heading that way, came along the road and somebody had stretched a rope across the road and it took his head off.
The local residents are proud that Presbury is said to be the most haunted village in Britain, and many have their own ghostly tales to tell.
But when I came home early one morning, I was coming down the high street, coming around the corner in my car, literally got 15 yards around the corner, and there's a black solid monk-like figure stood in my lane, not moving, not flinching. So didn't know what it was, basically drove round it, headed off. I don't know where it went.
As I came round that way in my car from down Cleeve Hill, I just come round the corner and he just sort of glides across the road and through the wall. I thought, oh, happy, that's nice. But you're not frightened. No, you just think,
None of them frighten us. I don't think
No.
anybody's frightened of any of the experiences they've had in the village. Nobody sort of goes around quaking or anything. It's just part of village life, really.
We had a lady come in here once who had never been to the salon before, never been to this area before, and she walked up the stairs and said, "Is there a presence here?" She said, I can feel something, and I believe his name is George.
Well, they say that village life is full of interesting characters, but I think most people expect them to be live ones. Here, however, there's a whole host of fascinating ghostly characters too, which are just part of the rich tapestry of Presbury village life. Stick around here for long, you don't know who I might bump into. See you next time. Bye-bye.